it's Jackie here, your host of the TV Foundation's brand new podcast, Say It Loud. We have a wicked guest on today's episode. So make sure you get your notepad and your biro because it's going to be a good one. I have never heard anybody depict the TV industry in the way that this person has. Honestly, it's so good. You'll regret it if you don't get your notepad. So go on, you've got time. Go off you go. Enjoy.
Sometimes I'm obsessing over reasons not to try. This time I'm gonna fight.
This is outrageous, Jackie.
Hello and welcome to Edinburgh TV Festival's brand new podcast, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. And I am buzzed for today's guest. In 2014, he made history. He was the first Black British solo comic to be nominated for the Edinburgh Comedy Award for Best Newcomer for his set, Citizen Zane. He's going on to his fourth stand-up tour this month, virtually of course, called Chocolate Chip. He's a regular on the TV circuit, featuring on Mock the Week. He's also known for creating and starring in his BBC Three sitcom Sunny D, and now his new BBC Three pilot, BAMOUS, which is everything unapologetically Black and British, which also aired on BBC One. He's not famous, he's famous. He always wants to give the UK talent their flowers. It's our florist, it's Dane Baptiste!
Hello, hi.
Hello, Dane.
Hello, hi. How are you doing, Jackie? What's happening, man?
I'm good, Dane. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm grateful. I'm blessed to be alive, taking it a day at a time. And thank you. I'm very grateful for the intro as well. Actually, don't let them tell you any otherwise. First Black British nominee ever. Duo, trio, sketch troupe, otherwise. No other Black Britain had been nominated. They have been since, though. We have made progress, but that was the first time.
That's amazing.
In the largest, it's amazing. I'm very, very grateful, but also amazing to think that in the world's largest arts festival that Black Britons hadn't previously had an applaud for that. So, it was very, very, very humbling and flattering to be the first. But fortunately, it was really the first of many, and long may it continue. So yeah,
Amen
I'm good.
to that.
How are you? How are you doing? What's happening?
Dane, I'm all right. I'm so happy to have you on. It's like, oh my God, we've got Dane Baptiste on. Dane, we're going to have so much fun. Seriously.
Don't doubt it.
And just know, on this podcast, we're not going to confuse you for Richard Blackwood or Darren Harris. It ain't that kind of podcast.
Fair enough. In this crazy world, yeah, it's nice. I mean, not taking anything away from those guys, but I have my own life that I want as well, and so
right, and you're a whole other person, so
completely.
Which we will talk a lot about on today's episode. Obviously, I called you a florist because it's clear in your comedy that you're always wanting to give people their flowers, which I think is really important. And I will also discuss about BAMOUS and why BAMOUS is just so important to our culture. So let's get into it. I mean, I didn't want to mention the C word, but I feel like these days we can't have a conversation without talking about COVID. How are you doing in the midst of this Panacada pandemonium?
It's I mean, personally, I'd say I'm doing okay. I've been very fortunate to be able to still work throughout 2020 during and post initial COVID lockdowns and the like. So I guess, professionally, I haven't been too bad. I would guess, I suppose socially, I've been okay. I've, again, grateful that there have been some losses to my family due to COVID and family friends. But in immediate family, everyone's still here. So I'm real grateful for that. But yeah, on the whole, man, I just feel like I've been okay, man. I think if I really sit back and think about what a lot of people are dealing with, some people have had massive damage to their livelihood or their ability to earn during this time, especially large members of the creative community. So yeah, for a lot of people, my heart goes out to them. A lot of people have, a large part of their income, the large part of the way they support themselves and their family comes from being able to be live performers, and seeing that taken away from them has been tough. So it's just been tough to watch, but it's allowed me to have perspective in terms of the small freedoms of movement or opportunity that I may have lost compared to other people. Hasn't been that bad, man. But for the main part, obviously, COVID is always going to bother me, obviously, due to the fact that we come from a community that is disproportionately affected by COVID,
right,
due to pre-existing health conditions. So that concerns me. So the more information and awareness that is spread and shared, the better, really. But that's it. As an artist, you know, my heart bleeds for the world. But you know, myself personally, I'm okay. So I guess I don't have the vaccine, but the more I can do in terms of giving people the best medicine as a comic, then the better.
right. Laughter is the best medicine, huh?
Yes, right. It's not a vaccination. I can't stress that enough. It's not as good as the Oxford or Pfizer vaccine, but you know, if I can soothe the other pain of loneliness or marginalization or anxiety or worry at these times, then yeah, I'm definitely Dr. Dane in that respect.
Yes, no, I love it. And your comedy, BAMOUS, has just been just so refreshing, especially during this time. Like, and also because of Black Lives Matter last year as well. Well, obviously, we're not Black, you know, for the month of June, we're Black 365 every single day. So it just felt so current, and just, we need to laugh. Black joy is, you know, it's a tool of resistance. So yeah, BAMOUS was just perfect for that.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons it exists. BAMOUS is the precipitation of a couple of years of work and ideas, and me trying to devise a new format which would allow I suppose, an expansive as well as positive look at the diaspora's contributions towards arts and culture and British society as a whole. It's also, I guess, the subtext of it is quite satirical when people say all lives matter. So I'm like, cool, well, these are the lives that shaped and molded my mind. So let me share them with the world.
Right.
But by that same token, you know, it's funny, people only tend to assert that all lives matter as a rebuttal to the statement that Black Lives Matter, which in itself led to the largest humanitarian movement that the world has ever seen.
Right.
And so, yeah, really the subtext of it is being that, well, okay, cool, all lives matter. Well, we'll see. I know you aren't feeding your children, but, you know, Black children and Black lives matter to me. And so I'll demonstrate that. Rather than me having the discourse back and forth about the semantics of lives mattering, I would much rather show and prove. And therefore, I wanted to create a format that showed that there are a number of lives that do matter to me. And I feel like, you know, it's 2020, as well as having obviously issues of biological nature with COVID. It was a very charged year, both racially and socially, where I feel, if nothing else, we are right at the door, banging on it and forcing either our oppressors or those who've had the privilege of oblivion to really have this conversation regarding institutional and structural racism, as well as racial rhetoric. And so again, BAMOUS is really, again, attesting that idea that people who assert that Britain is not racist and that we don't have the same issues in our social fabric as America does, well, BAMOUS seeks to kind of, really hold that to task. If we are comfortable and we are asserting that we are fully integrated, then a show like this really shouldn't be a problem, because it's not particularly distinct from British culture, because these Black Britons are British people as well, in the same way that if we can have a TV show which we focus on the Spanish Football League in this country, you can have a TV show where we focus on, you know, particular regions of the UK, like, you know, Mrs. Brown's Boys focuses on the Republic of Ireland, whereas, you know, Gavin and Stacey took place in Wales, where we are looking at Welsh, the subculture of Wales and Ireland respectively, as subculture of the British Isles. Well, we've been here, you know, as far back as Cheddar Man. And so having a show which looks at ourselves and our contributions based on our aesthetic and a few of our culture, there shouldn't be a problem with that, because Black British culture is, by definition, British culture.
I think that's such a good point, because we only need to look at the outrage over Sainsbury's adverts. You know, I think it was there was a few adverts that were done where they were Black families, and there was outrage. Like, I'm never shopping at, you know, Sainsbury's again or whatever. And it's like, okay, but we said the UK is not racist, but why does a Black family offend you on, you know, on an advert? We are British people as well, and I think that.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's even weirder that people are affected by it, despite the fact that Argos had the similar campaign with aliens.
They had aliens, and Audi had carrots.
And Audi had carrots, and so, you know, it really speaks to the, I guess, the collective consciousness of your quintessential racist, or I suppose alt-right ideologue, who believes that, you know, that these issues are more about ourselves and seeking victimhood and the like. It's like, well, you seem to be fine with aliens, and even though we've not proved the existence of extraterrestrials, no one has a problem with them being here. And I always find it quite ironic that, you know, you hear Americans, you know, even with their xenophobic rhetoric, refer to, you know, members of the Latinx community as illegal aliens. So I'm just like, so you're fine with actual aliens who don't pay a cent, not even from this planet, but people from the other side of the border is what you have a problem with. So if Mexicans kidnap you in a flying ship and put
Right.
birds in your butt and kidnap you with cows, would you find them more respectable then? Because
Mm.
you have a whole area called 51 in Roswell, New Mexico. It's funny that they're fine with aliens in New Mexico, but old Mexico, they got a problem with them aliens.
Right.
So yeah, again, it's kind of like really poking fun at this rhetoric, because I feel like one of the issues we're dealing with now is this attempt to try and give legitimacy to alt-right rhetoric,
Right.
where, you know, people are like, we need to give people a platform. I'm like, if somebody is trying to explain with no factual or scientific basis why one group of people is superior to the other, they don't need a platform. If you're in a maths class and they say 1 and 1 is 2 and someone goes, but I think it's 3, we don't go, well, they have a right to their opinion, let's have a discussion. They say, you go in the bottom set because you're not smart.
Right.
So, you know, I just think it's been a long time where we've given some very regressive rhetoric way too much credence. And so, but at the same time, not acknowledging a narrative from the diaspora. And so, again, you know, is why I wanted to create a show which really provides a platform for that discourse.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into BAMOUS and how you came up with the concept, I want to go back to before you went into comedy. So I know you went to uni, studied business.
Mm-hmm.
You worked in some call centers.
Few, yeah.
Oh my God, I think a call center is literally the worst job. Like, I literally did that job and it was horrible.
It's very bad, yeah. It's not, I mean, yeah, it's not great. I mean, I'm sure every creative has got a story about the jobs they had to do or used to do before they were able to either support themselves or pursue their creative aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they were terrible. I mean, yeah, right at the bottom of rung of the ladder, I think, of the service industry. But at the same time, it really allowed me to make some astute observations that do benefit me now, because I think one of the biggest boons to my career, I would say, artistically, has been spending time on the other side of the microphone. Because
you did a lot of theory, right? Before you entered
absolutely. And not just that, having the practical application of said theory, because it's all fine of me thinking about things and talking about everyday life, but it's much better and you do it in much better depth with much more relatability if you've actually experienced it. So, and you know, I think that's a big part of the appeal of comedy and why your more successful comedians do tend to prosper, is because, you know, they are the everyman. They speak a language that most other people tend to understand. You speak from a position of experience, and therefore that experience is more likely to be shared by your audience. So yeah, I did some terrible jobs, but they definitely taught me that what I didn't want to do with my life. And I think they definitely steeled my resolve in terms of working out a way to really maximize my potential. And I think it's really an existential crisis that a lot of Black people in the workforce kind of arrive at, where, you know, like everybody else, they realize that, you know, no one's going to make you rich at the expense of their own job.
Right.
But at the same time as well, is that I think a lot of the time, you know, many, many stories below the proverbial glass ceiling, Black people are met with a lot of, you know, impediments to their progress. And I was just going to be like, I'm not having this. I didn't go to university and get into all these thousands of pounds of student loan. To literally have people in the office say, you might be gone to university, but I'm still going to be your boss. Right. Like, I'm not here for that. So.
Yeah. But then I guess your experience of working in call centers, you know, probably was really good research, I imagine, for your role in Sunny D, where, you know, you were playing like a kind of frustrated, tired millennial, trying to make sense of the world and like clashing with family and friends and colleagues. So I guess it was good. That experience actually has, you know, you've been able to take that and kind of turn it into art. And I guess with a lot of comedy is, you know, you have regular jobs that you do before you make it big time, and they work for really good anecdotes and stuff in your storytelling. So I guess that's how I guess working in a call center probably played into your art.
Yeah, definitely. But really, I guess just on an interpersonal level, just meeting regular people with regular jobs, and just looking at most people within a developed country in a capitalist society, what their normal inclinations, their needs, wants, and dreams are. Because, you know, I think at the quantum of observational comedy, what you're trying to do is really capture the human spirit. That's why it works. And so I just think you normally tend to work just as a phenomenon is such a large part of most people's lives that, you know, you're probably going to get the best idea about humanity when you see people at work. So yeah, that was one of the good things. And also just humbles you, is, you know, it's why now, even today, where work may have slowed for myself and other peers, the idea of maybe if having to get work, or, you know, knowing that other comedians are returning to the workforce, means that I'm never pretentious about it. I don't take any position of superiority over my peers. And, you know, the creative industry is nothing set in stone. This could all end tomorrow. And if it still meant that I needed to go work back in a call center to provide for my family, like, you know, I've been brought up with an immigrant work ethic. So, you know, I'm glad that comedy works and it's lucrative to an extent. But boy, if I need to go back and hustle and go work in a call center to make ends meet or to help my family, then, well, I'd have to do jokes there too. So.
No, it's true. I think a lot of creatives, yeah, they've all, you know, I know a lot of creatives who have worked in call centers, and it does humble you. And I guess it's just, you know, you got to make ends meet. You got to do what you got to do. And I guess the most important thing is, you know, it's not a forever thing. It's always going to lead to something else because you're building skills. You know, when I worked in a call center, like I said that my name was Trixie Jones. And I was like, it's Trixie Jones on behalf of the Business Finance Roundtable, because it's like, you know, and it's good experience and it's funny, and you can, you know, you can tell these stories, you know, with friends, and you can tell it.
It's an experience, and I think it's important that, you know, there are some people that do work in a call center, and there are some people trying to forge a career while working in the call center. And I don't want anyone to think that I look at them and think, ugh, peasants. It's not really how I feel. It's you know, it's more about capturing and just, yeah, for me it was just more of a financial thing. But at the same time, yeah, I don't look back on my employment history from the perspective of regret or from resentment, because I do believe that having that experience amongst the laity, or, you know, your average layperson, has helped me as a comedian to be a lot more relatable. I find that a lot of punters that visit comedy clubs from the beginning of my career and way up until as recently as, like, you know, before lockdown, you know, I think a lot of the time, people who find it hard to relate to comedians from a very different socio-economic background to them, they tend to go so far. And one way to look at it is that, like, even I'd say like a large contingent of the more successful class of British comics do come from a middle class background, or more of a privileged background, which is fine. You know, you can't control into which life you're born into, but at the same time, that kind of bodes in a very interesting way on a global scale, because if you do come from a wealthy family and your experiences include those of privilege, for most people, they can't necessarily relate to that. And so it means that you can only appeal to a considerable minority. And so for me, how that manifests is the fact that when you look at most Forbes lists for, you know, global earnings for stand-up comedians, while there are a lot of British comics that have a lucrative career, tends to be very much localized within the UK and potentially Australia, as opposed to our American contemporaries who tend to be in the top 10 of earners because of the large scale of relatability that they do have. I think like Americans, they're very honest about that, whether it is about, like, you know, the paradigm of work and employment or labor, or, you know, more taboo subjects like racism, which is something we are very reticent to discuss in the UK, but it's something that globally the collective consciousness is aware of. So if you are a British person trying to act like racism doesn't exist with the same level of intensity as other developed nations, when you visit said nations and you're like, this is my life, they're going to be like, where are you from? I've never heard of a place like this. You know, it's like Notting Hill. When most people think of Notting Hill in the UK, the next word that comes up is carnival.
Yeah.
Right. But the film Notting Hill did not depict this and gave a very different aesthetic.
Good point.
Very different aesthetic as to what people would think Notting Hill was represented by. And so, again, you know, that will have a knock-on butterfly effect, where if people do not see an aesthetic that's accurate, that reflects the diversity of the UK, particularly in areas of London, then when they hear people like ourselves crying out about this, then obviously people will be naturally perturbed as to why Black people are complaining with such intensity, because they've been misled by the representation of ourselves and of our homes on mainstream media.
Right. I think that's really interesting, because I feel like we're still not really reflected in the mainstream media. And I think that you've touched on the fact that you feel like your role is to you know, give flowers to the 30-somethings, you know, Black men in, you know, the UK who have now been subjected to only working in sport or news. And you're trying, right. And that is very true. I think there is I think being a Black creative in this country is that it feels like you have to be in a box. You can't just be like a Louis Theroux and, you know, decide that you're going to go and travel the world and do, you know, do a documentary on porn or polyamory or tigers. You have to be subjected to a specific box and you can't be outside that box. And if you are, then you don't have, it's almost like you don't have a career. You just get forgotten about.
Absolutely, absolutely. For men and women, members of the non-binary community,
right.
I think for the diaspora of a particular generation, it has been very difficult, and I've seen how that has kind of played out and the problems that have arisen as a result of that. So I remember myself personally, I remember the last, I'd say, nigh unhealthy representation of Black people probably ended in the early noughties with kind of like the decline of Richard Blackwood's career following his record deal and the like. And I felt like the industry kind of shut shop on opportunities for Black people, because around the time of circa Richard Blackwood, his predecessors would have been like the A-Force with Ginny Yashere and himself, and you know, shows like Brothers and Sisters. Before that, you'd had the Real McCoy, Desmond's, you know, Pork Pie having a spin-off, you know, Three Non-Blondes being on BBC Three as well, Miss Jocelyn. So, you know, there was quite a decent amount of representation, but, you know, it's very strange when you think about something like Red Dwarf, which in my eyes is like a BBC institution. But then the only time you see someone like even Danny John Jules again is in Murder in Paradise, kind of confined to appearing on these Caribbean aesthetics, because I guess as a Black Briton, he's more passable than an actual Caribbean actor.
Right.
But in that time where Black opportunities disappeared, to the tune of the fact that Sunny D, my sitcom, is the first sitcom with a majority Black cast that had appeared on the BBC in 20 years.
Wow.
Or be on British TV in 20 years. And so for me, that's like a real issue. That's a serious issue, but that's an entire generation. And what that has meant is that for the successive generations, they have only really seen any kind of quasi-representation of themselves in the form of music. And even that has only been more egalitarian with the explosion of the internet. You know, I'd say if you look at personalities now, whether it's Maya Jama, Munya Chihuahua, Chunks and Philly, Harry Pinero et al., it's amazing that they have been able to transcend their talent and their personalities and so many other opportunities. But without a broadband connection, that would be nigh on impossible if these same people had to subsist on mainstream media to recognize their potential as presenters or hosts, etc. And what it's meant is that, but at the same time, like you said, it means that Black creativity has kind of been forced to become some form of monolith where they don't really distinguish on our creativity in terms of like our music being very separate from classic music, being separate from contemporary music, being separate from stand-up comedy versus character comedy, and all of the other subgenres and variances that you see within, I guess, what's regarded as white British comedy, whereas Black British comedy tends to be the same monolith as music. And that's evidenced by the fact that if you think about some of the more prolific comics that have realized success more recently, Munya Chihuahua has done so because he does very good parodies of pre-existing music. Michael Dapper became Big Shaq and rose to fame because he did A Fire in the Booth. Mo Gilligan obviously has proven his success and viability as a star, but that came from him having to mimic different types of grime MCs in order for him to go viral, which you know, is just and then doing a show with Big Nasty himself, who is a former grime rapper, who's become a comedy personality through his viral videos. And for me, like, it's good on the one hand, opportunities are always good to see for people like ourselves, but at the same time, like you said, it does leave us in a rather restrictive box where the spectrum of topics for debate seem to revolve around music and women and a lot of, I guess, adolescent preoccupations, whether it's like clothes and food and girls. So then you end up arriving at a point where you'll be in your late 30s to 40s. And basically at the point in your life where you're at your most economically and politically mobile.
Right.
You're fully grown. This is when you're raising your children. It's when this is when you actively participate in legislation and government policy because they affect you directly, because you'll probably be paying taxes while you're trying to forge a career, paying off a mortgage or renting a property, and, you know, actively participating in regular grown folk shit that most people aren't doing. The problem is that that is an archetype for the diaspora that is seldom seen in the media. And so for many, in that same 20 years I'm describing, if you're a Black person that's our age and you were looking to domestic television to be represented, you would have seen it. So half that time, if 10 years of seeing more shows about robots and cupcakes and foxes have been on TV, you're going to be like, well, I don't watch TV in the UK because I don't see anybody like me on there. And then for those that you do see on there, because they are so molded to more have a narrative, which is much more reminiscent of, you know, middle-class white people than other Black people, then people find it very hard to engage with these people. And those guys as well find that in order for them to realize their creative aspirations, they have to dilute their act and make it more affable to white audiences, so it becomes unrecognizable to their previously black audience as well. So as well as having the representation, for the representation that does exist, there's a large cultural rift between them and the diaspora at large. And, you know, that was something I needed to work against, because I went to uni outside of the country, outside of London, as a city in the country, in Yorkshire, where I was aware that there are some people that live in Yorkshire they don't see black people unless they see them on TV. And normally the capacity in which they saw them would be like in Match of the Day, whereby they're getting sound bites and very little social commentary from their black idols, or they see them in music, where again, the subject matter does not really allow for you to have an honest and in-depth account of the black British journey. And people need to be able to hear and speak to and from other people in order for them to form a more rounded perspective of those people. It's been a dark ages for dark people for a good generation. And even though like younger people are now starting to enjoy success on the internet and the like, the problem has been is that now the curation of these same creatives isn't taking place, you know, at the same rate that it should. And what you find is that it's fine when people are able to garner large audiences on the internet, but making that translate onto streaming platforms can be a bit more difficult. And what you tend to find is that black people or creatives, their positions seem to be interchangeable. So, you know, someone like Big Nasty can do a panel show, but no one's going to ask Professor Green to host Live at the Apollo, because Professor Green is historically a rapper, and so white media is aware that it would be a bad fit. But they're happy for black people to be interchangeable on any kind of panel show or format. But at the same time, like, you know, a white person knows that Paul Gascoigne is probably not going to be the person that appears on Have I Got News for You, because there's an understanding of like where people's different disciplines lie. And so the battle not only is for our representation, but it's also for the distinction within that representation, whereby we are in the best kind of fit places. You know, again, another example being the whole thing where Obama was elected, and the first person that Jeremy Paxman and the rest of BBC Newsnight consulted for their viewpoint on that was Dizzy Rascal. It's like, if, you know, when you have an election, like no one's going to go to Dappy from N-Dubs to find out what he thinks about, you know, the intensity of politics in Greece. So it's like, why would you go to that?
Right. I think that is often the problem, is that we become spokespeople, you know. And I think there was an interview that, if this isn't the one you're talking about, where Dizzy Rascal was on, I can't remember. I think
it was the second one with Piers Morgan, yeah, and he was saying, this time, don't make me do that again.
Yeah, right.
Because he
and it's, you know, as much as it's entertainment and it's new and it's refreshing for, you know, white Britain in that sense, for black people like us, it is trauma. And it's like, this is what we have to deal with all the time. So, and also,
and the trauma for us, Jackie, is that, like, you know, it's not like we hate seeing Dizzy Rascal or someone like Dizzy Rascal on TV. It's because every black person is aware is that based on his narrative, our perspective, as our collective perception, is going to change based on this whole how they see Dizzy Rascal. It's like when you're a black person and you watch like Big Brother, when the housemate comes, you're basically on tenterhooks, because you know whatever that person says, they're going, that's going to be used to reflect on all of us. So if that person says, I'm not too big on showers, the next day at the water cooler at work or by the photocopier, now you got to field questions as to why. So you don't shower? What you doing? Do you know what I mean? It's very different for ourselves because we're so seldom seen. Like, and that's going to affect white audiences as well. If we're so seldom seen, they can only go on what they see. So if these mismatches continue, then there's never going to be an accurate reflection, because, like I said, people can only go on what they see. And then what happens is that if people see what they believe to be a representation of black people, even when it's something like Ali G, who is being done by Sacha Baron Cohen, who's mimicking a Pakistani, who's mimicking a black person, which is not a black person. But what it means is that there's enough very shallow and superficial indicators like big chains and bling and
good. And also it's because I black, and it's like everybody used to say that in school, and it's like,
yeah, exactly. And for me, if you say that to me, it's because I fucking hate you and you're an idiot and unoriginal. And and that used to be epitomized the problem, whereby people repeat these catchphrases and these very shallow things. And what happens is that you'll see these quasi black or Afro aesthetics, which don't actually represent us. and then it's just more of an objectification. So there's women shaking bums in Adedeji shows, but no one's actually speaking. Or, you know, you see black women shaking their bums in the Lily Allen video when she's doing a video about objectification, but it's like, well, why don't you speak to them about their experience instead of just using them to shake their bums and stuff? It's like, it's all well and good having people dance and sing behind you, but, you know, again, we're not really having a discourse if you're not allowing the people that are most affected by or represent this group the opportunity to speak on their own behalf.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you know, you touched on this in BAMOUS, but, you know, we're losing our UK talent to America. And, you know, it isn't just because there's more opportunity, but there's also, I think as a minority, you can speak to millions of Black audiences. So like Jeannie Ashray, you know, I remember reading an interview where she had talked about the fact that she was sick of just being the regular blackface on Mock the Week. And actually, if she didn't go to America, she would still be the regular face on Mock the Week. And she said that there was a time when Little Miss Jocelyn got her show, and she just thought, they're not going to have us both on at the same time. Yeah. So I've got to go. It's time for me to go, because of the nightclub policy that we have is 1 in, 1 out. You know, which is so unfair. And I think that, you know, touching on what we talked about how I think Black people, we have a strong collective identity. And I think one thing that's a privilege, I think, with, you know, with white people is that you're seen as an individual.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're seen as a collective. So
it's a function of conditioning.
Improve our individuality every time.
It's such a massive function of conditioning as well, because like I said, you're not doing it in a derogatory way, but even when you use the term minority, this is how it's been suggested to us to mislead us. We are not the minority. If you are white Anglo-Saxon Protestant in the US or in the UK, on a global scale, you are a minority. There's like 70 million people here, 300 million people in the States. There are 0.8 billion sub-Saharan Africans living just on the continent alone. That doesn't even include people who are politically identified as Black, whether it's Indigenous Australians, people from Papua New Guinea, the Seychelles, Chagos Islands, just to name like the Southern Hemisphere in terms of where the diaspora are based. So even when we use the term minority and saying that British people connect with a minority, they're not really a minority, because they're connecting with people that are, you know, a large contingent on continental Europe, in the Americas. So we have been fooled into this idea that we speak from a position of a minority, where we speak to a much larger audience. Like, for example, the largest stand-up comedian in the world is Russell Peters, who is an Asian Canadian, because he is able to speak to a large contingent of people in the Eastern Hemisphere. So he can sell out in Mumbai, he can sell out in the United Arab Emirates. As I said, because of the experience of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, however people feel, however dominant it's been, it's still a minority narrative, which means the ability to identify with it is very limited. And obviously that is created through racial hierarchy and supremacy, where if you're considered to be more distinct and better than us, well, of course people can't relate to you. But yeah, I think really in terms of our representation, how we've been treated as a monolith is disgusting, because we are fee payers and we're taxpayers. So we should have that kind of representation on that front. Also, I think it's embarrassing at the fact that, you know, the world very clearly, and, you know, America very overtly is outspoken about its platitudes regarding race, particularly those of African descent. We're seeing it all the time. And yet, despite that, through the same merit of chattel slavery and just Black people being in the presence of American homes through the media, it's very clear that for those who are interested, they are provided with an insight into African-American life. From my perspective as comedians, it's like, you know, comedians of my generation, you know, you have Kevin Hart's today, but even before that, you would have had a Chris Rock, and before that, an Eddie Murphy, before that, a Richard Pryor, before that, a Red Fox, before, you know, so they have a long-lasting transgenerational legacy of the African-American experience in that form of art and culture alone. Whereas in the UK, you know, like I said, Jeannie Ashray is aware, despite the fact that she is headlining at every comedy club in the UK and doing Mock the Week, she isn't given an opportunity to even get a show commission. There are comedians who have nowhere near the success of Gina, who will be given commission after commission after commission. And again, like I said, it's not a function of a meritocracy. So yeah, us hemorrhaging talent is something that I think we've all gotten used to. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't something I considered, so much to the point whereby from the first time my parents brought me to the United States in 1990, and I think already then they became aware of the comparative large opportunities available to me in the States. So I'm also a resident of the United States because I had my green card processed. And
okay.
Yeah, so mine came through like 2012. So, you know, for that, part of that is for me to be like, you know, if I find that my opportunities are still being marginalized at a certain point in the UK, I am more than prepared to leave these shores.
Well, we don't, Dane, we don't want to lose you.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go. But you know, at the same time, what I also want to do is I also want to extend a bridge as well, where it's almost seen as a natural progression that if you are a good and accomplished artist, there's no reason why you shouldn't be in America. On the other hand, because you know, when it comes to the music, you know, Black Britons and you know, Black performers in general had to suffer with the British invasion, whereby we saw the rise of success of like the Rolling Stones and groups of that nature, who themselves were mimicking Black rock and roll stars from 20 years prior. And you know, today you look at it this way, like now through the merit of the internet, Black artists are able to prosper, not just in the UK, but in the States, so much so that 10% of all music that's being streamed is British artists. But prior to that, you could only if you were Ed Sheeran, Adele, or Amy Winehouse, could you enjoy American success. And again, the success comes from the fact that these three non-Black artists were successful at emulating Black music.
Right.
Because there's nothing Amy Winehouse would have done that Billie Holiday didn't. Or that Adele did that like Keisha White couldn't do, like narratively, or even Neo.
Oh my gosh, Keisha White.
Right. Or yeah, Keisha White or Beverly Knight, you know, vocally, or and Emily Sandé.
Yeah.
You know, people who are, you know, vocal legends with unmistakable voices that can, you know, vocally, a Beverly Knight or Emily Sandé can go toe to toe with any American vocalist, as could Leona Lewis. But even when Leona realized her success on British TV, because Simon Cowell believed in her so much, the first thing he did was send her to work under the auspices of Clive Davis, because he's probably aware that the competence in order to develop an artist, a Black artist of that with that much potential, is not going to happen in the UK. Right. I even read an article recently by Labyrinth in Esquire magazine, right, where he was lamenting the fact that after Pass Out came out and he had a record deal, he signed with Psycho and did his song Earthquake, then did another song called Let the Sun In. Let the Sunshine. He's showing the range. Like Labyrinth is a producer, he's a vocalist, he's a rapper, he can sing ballads, he's very talented, and he's also a producer. But because British eyes have been deprived of a musical polymath of that nature in this country, in America, that's seen as a given. To be a rapper producer.
Euphoria. Did he produce the music for Euphoria? That new.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And this is someone who is not even 40 yet, who not only was an accomplished musician and able to produce one of the biggest songs in the UK, contemporary songs in the UK, but he's also able to score like TV shows. Again, I really am very doubtful about the fact that he'd be able to have those opportunities or realize those to the maximum if he was staying in the UK. And you know, at the time, I even noticed then, it's like, if you looked at the successful musicians of the time, like whether it's Tiny Temper, Tinchy Stryder, or an N-Dubs, Chipmunk, not taking anything away from them, they are very successful and very accomplished artists, but it really seemed that there was this drive to infantilize their aesthetic. Like, he's a Tiny Temper and he's a Tinchy Stryder, and N-Dubs with a little Z is cute and kitsch, and Chipmunk is like a non-threatening rodent. So it's like, even then, it was still trying to whitewash Black creativity to make it more palatable, or perceived as more palatable to white audiences. Whereas you fast forward now, like, you know, a good 10 plus years, white guys in Bognor Regis, or they know who Giggs is. Yeah. And you know, he enjoys success there. And it just makes me think, you know, at a time where you had emerging talent like Sway and Baby Blue and Pirelli and like all these other rappers who kind of had a slight level of buzz, how different their careers would have been had they been given the opportunity and visibility of their white peers 20 years ago. Right. Yeah.
That's how I feel when I think about. Do you remember when Funky House was popping off?
Yeah, absolutely. I do.
Oh my days.
I do. And even then, it could only do so well because, like, a lot of the raves are shut. Yeah. Funky House kind of got big off of the back of like grime being prevented to be able to prosper, and then going into a decline, and obviously UK garage, because, you know, I remember the times when So Solid were one of the biggest acts in the UK. Yeah, right. Then their ability to go anywhere was kind of banned. And then it led to their kind of dissolution. And then it's very coincidental that a group like Blazing Squad, who follows the same thing of being a collective of like several members, a song that they didn't write. Yeah, they did.
Bone Thugs and Harmony, right?
There you go. So they've taken a Black song, you know, a Black aesthetic of having multiple members in your garage collective or rap collective, and it's just been whitewashed to be more palatable to British audiences.
That's so interesting.
Anyway, N-Dubs is cool, but before N-Dubs, were doing remixing songs and doing ha ha and sounding like that kind of. But that sound was being done with Big Brothers when they was doing My Favorite Things.
Okay, right, okay, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, because one person brings up weed, the entire group is condemned because of one person bringing weed back from Amsterdam. But now you're living in a society where seem to be very comfortable and au fait with using marijuana-based products. And even the biggest distributor and importer of marijuana in the UK was a guy called Howard Marks. And his autobiography was called Mr. Nice. And for me, it's very strange that, like, you know, we can conflate drug paraphernalia and criminality with black groups, but when a white guy does it, he's more of a hippie and he's being Mr. Nice, and it's just a little bit of weed, man.
Right.
Yeah, I think all of these things kind of feed into the deprivation of opportunities that we've kind of had, and yeah, it was a large part of the impetus for me to create as I do.
But this is why, you know, Sunny D and BAMOUS are so important. And actually, Sunny D, because I mean, that was Gbemi Sola's Ikumelo's first comedy debut, right? And now she won a
first TV debut.
First TV debut. So yeah. She won, and she now won a BAFTA for her show Brain and Gear for the BBC. And then obviously Catherine Ryan, before she was on Sunny D, had no prior TV experience. So, you know, you are putting people on, and in the same way what you've done with BAMOUS as well. Yeah. With your NAS index, and you know, you had all the names, you know, you had Henry, and you had lots of people who I guess in the black entertainment world we know, but in the kind of white entertainment world, maybe they do know, maybe they don't know. And so, you know, you're putting people on, which I think is really important, because, you know, who's going to do it for us? Someone's got to, you know, we're going to do it for ourselves. And I think that's why BAMOUS is really, really important. And actually, I'm quite interested in your transition from doing stand-up to TV. Mm-hmm. How was that kind of process from when you came up with the concept for Sunny D, and how did that come about then, pitching that? Did you pitch that then to BBC Three? And then, because how many episodes did you have? Is it 4 episodes? I think.
Yeah. So 4 episodes for the series itself, following the pilot. So Sunny D began with the BBC Comedy Commissioner, Shane Allen at the time, came to see me performing in Edinburgh. He had approached myself and my management with the opportunity to participate in the scheme by the BBC called Feed My Funny, where they do offer up-and-coming creatives the opportunity to write a one-off experimental show for BBC Three, and see how it works. And so Sunny D kind of was going to. So I guess Sunny D as a format, you know, we kind of flitted between it being quasi Chappelle show-esque, or maybe being more reminiscent of the famous style you see in BAMOUS, and then agreeing for it to be a sitcom, which is kind of reflective of my life. And initially, even then the editorial was kind of mimicking some of my stand-up and how that kind of plays out into sketches. And then we kind of went for the more, I guess, classical sitcom narrative, but with just my unique touch on it. And then. Yeah, really, when Sunny D the opportunity came along, it was me really trying to, on the one hand, create a space where I could aesthetically define stereotypes. I felt like prior to Sunny D, most of the representations of nuclear black families were not particularly accurate. I think I don't want to speak for everybody, but you know, black people don't just live on council estates. That's not the reality. Particularly for a Windrush generation that came here who had no concept of government receivership or criminality, because for you to have come to the UK, Windrush, you wouldn't be able to have a criminal record anyway. So, you know, my parents had no experience of that, and I never had that kind of experience growing up. So I wanted to reflect that. Also, with Sunny D, I also wanted it to be intra-racially representative. So obviously, Bemi Camelo being of Nigerian descent, as was David Ajayo, but both of them being seasoned and well-trained Shakespearean actors. And so I wanted to show, on one hand, that not only do black people able to tread the boards, but they can translate that into TV very well, to the tune of, like, later receiving the BAFTA for Bemi, obviously. And then also having Sasha Frost being of dual heritage, and, you know, part of that being based in from Bristol, where again, you could argue another marginalized group of being from white working class outside of London and the home counties. Right. So that was important. My mother was played by Liz Humes Dawson, who's of dual heritage, and her father is from Sierra Leone, and my cousin was played by Kinch, who is also now the producer of Famalam and got his opportunity following Sunny D. And Kemji's from Cameroon. And so it was having, you know, I'm proud to say that of the Britons that appeared in Sunny D, 40 of them were of an immigrant background, both on screen and behind the camera. So it's definitely about giving people a bring in, because I feel like all endeavors of self-determination begin by first people coming together and asserting what rights they want for themselves. And so I really just feel like we'd all do better kind of working together. And also because I guess when I try to create, especially in terms of these formats, and it's bigger than myself. It's like, you know, I look at my predecessors and my idols, like the Chappelle Show, obviously put Dave Chappelle in a elevated position and deserved position in comedy. But for those who are massive comedy fans, we also know that he worked with Neil Brennan on the Chappelle Show. He also had Bill Burr on the show. He had Eddie Griffin on the show. Obviously, it allowed for Charlie Murphy to begin to forge a career. Donnell Rawlings. And that's just to name a few of, you know, the amazing people that appeared in the show. And so for me, it's like BAMOUS and Sunny D are just reflections of the fact that I have been given opportunities to realize my aspirations, and I have to try and find that same spark within my peers who I work with. And yeah, in the same way that I was given an opportunity to make things work, it's the same thing I just want to pass on and pay it forward and do it with people who believe fully in their abilities. So yeah, for me, it's like, you know, I look at someone like Wiley, as eccentric as it is, but it can't be denied that he has provided a scene and opportunity for so many other musicians to come up from under him or around him. And I just want to do the same. I really want to do the same.
Pass the baton on, essentially.
And just, you know what, just not just pass the baton on, but just make an entire stadium whereby it's just seen as a given. Because, like I said, it was so surprising to find that you're the first Black Briton to be nominated at the world's largest arts festival. And so for me, it's kind of like, well, is that down to the fact that people feel marginalized? Probably partially, and also a lack of awareness. And so, yeah, again, a better way of describing it is that, like, how much the West knew about martial arts before Bruce Lee, following Bruce Lee. And I want to leave that kind of same impact, whereby it's never going to be a point of mystique for people to be like, what Black people like in Britain? Like,
you're a national treasure.
One day I will be, but at the same time, I'd rather be a treasured somewhere other than regions, isn't it? It's bigger than countries and stuff like that, man. So yeah, just a good brick in the wall that towards freedom.
You know, I was gonna, you know, your show, Sunny D, actually reminds me a lot of Everybody Hates Chris. And I was going to say, you know, does Chris Rock inspire you? Because I can see, you know, his comedy is also very socially conscious in the same way that yours is. So I was going to ask you, you know, who inspires you, but I assume it's Chris Rock.
Absolutely.
As well as others.
Probably, yeah, that's probably the person I tried to closest imitate with the.
And he's a real goofball, you know, and that's what I like about him.
As am I. So
are you, right?
The thing is, so basically for me, when I was 15, I went to watch a comedy live first at a show in Catford in South East London at the Broadway Theatre, and it's a frequent place where a lot of like globally successful immigrant actors come over. So Oliver Samuels would be there quite often and stuff. Blue Mountain Theatre, and this is like a production company or theatre production company that will put on shows for Black audiences, like, you know, Anthony Mild put on amazing shows there. I went to see Russell Peters, Leo Muhammad of Real McCoy fame, and D.L. Hughley, obviously, who is now the podcaster who's on The Fix on Netflix, but initially started off as to compare on BET's Comic View, so one of the funniest compares I'd ever seen. So that was the first part where I was like, this is amazing, and I can't even put a word in this experience. So the act of performing comedy, I saw it then and I loved it and making people laugh. But then when I saw and listened to Chris Rock's album, so the first time I saw it, I listened to it. So when I listened to him do stand up and Big and Black, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life.
Wow.
Yeah. So Chris Rock he lit the spark. That's the person I think I definitely endeavor to emulate the most. Like I said, in terms of like social commentary and impact on the culture and art form, I definitely want to do with my career what Chris Rock has done with his. It's
interesting because I also feel like there is a massive gap in the market in terms of, at least with, you know, UK Black talent, in the way that we address race. And I feel like you fit into that gap quite well. I know you've mentioned in an article, you talked about the fact that, you know, you feel you have to discuss race at a foundation level.
Yeah.
That hasn't been addressed in depth by your predecessors, which I found really interesting. Because yeah, your comedy is very, I think it's it's witty, it's brilliant, but it's also, I think, because I guess as a black comedian, you know, you have to address. I think you have to address your race because it is a massive part of your lived experience. But I think there's a way of doing it. I suppose there's an art to doing it where you have a black and a white audience that understand that, and I think you do that really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely what I endeavor to do that very much, in that I don't walk on stage under the presumption or with a tone of accusation when I'm performing to a white audience and presuming that they are racist or hold racist views.
Sure.
But I am aware that a lot of people, like I said, in that 20 years, which was the black people dark ages of the UK, there are people that have not seen any aesthetic, any heard any narrative or anything regarding black people. And so all of their perception is based on what they are able to see. So because of that, I have to presume sometimes that people's knowledge of the black experience in the UK over the last 20 years is nigh on nil, because when you show up and they only see black people, anytime they see black people, they're like, well, they're just going to be pissed off about racism, thinking that we don't really think about other stuff. And so that's going to make, if you are a 30-something-year-old white woman and you live in a satellite town in Middle England, and every time you see a black person, they're screwing their face up because they're angry about start cussing Piers Morgan, then you're going to be less inclined to listen to them because you're not really predisposed to be dealing with that conflict. You don't know what it stems from, how it stems from, and you probably and you also probably lack the discursive tools to have that discussion. So for me, it's about, I had to kind of start at a very rudimentary level. Also because of the fact that with the diaspora, for those who live outside of metropolitan cities like London or Manchester or Liverpool or Bristol, your experience is very different to our own. But that shouldn't invalidate your experience. Like, there's a lot of black people that do not know about what it's like to go and get your trim at a barbershop and see mandem everywhere. There's not black people that know what it's like to casually go to a hair shop and pick out right matayaki and stuff like that. But not because they don't care or they don't have an affinity with their culture. It's just they don't have that in their environment. So I needed to create a narrative whereby these people wouldn't feel necessarily excluded. Also,
that's amazing. Because I think you don't want to feel like you're less black. Because
that's because the problem. Because if you do feel less black, you're less likely to engage with something that is professing to be a clear representation of blackness. And also we cannot deny, like, on a biological level, blackness versus whiteness is not something you can define scientifically. And I say that in terms of the fact that, people will say stuff like, but what about mixed race people? Well, Barack Obama has a white mother. He was still regarded as the black president, which means it's not a function of biology, it's a function of politics. So I am aware that there are some black people that do not share the same platitudes as the rest of us, don't identify with blackness politically. But I'm also aware that there are some like people being mixed race. That's been generational in places like Toxteth in Liverpool or in Bristol. There is a wealth of people that have had a long-going, honest and genuine mix of cultures of being of dual heritage. Again, just because you appear to be half black, I can't invalidate your blackness. I have no basis to do so. But I hope that in what I'm talking about, you will still see some kind of mutuality in our experience. In the same way that, like, for a long time, and or you look at when things intensified so much here, where like there was a year of the Mobos where no dancehall artists were allowed to participate in the Mobos because they were perceived to be homophobic, which is fair. But again, it's very ironic that now the conversation on social media is about free speech. None of these people are so vocal for these dancehall artists, but they're very fine to hear, like, people with white supremacist platitudes or regressive ideology regarding women or treatment of women. They're like, everyone deserves a platform. But no one was saying this when, they said the Elephant Man or like, people were doing like Chichi Man songs. It wasn't okay. But I don't agree with it. But at the same time, like I said, it means that people are used to a particular narrative and stereotype about black people, even black members of the LGBT community. So again, they feel a disconnect with what they perceive to be largely West African / Afro-Caribbean / Christian conservative contingent, as if black people can't be liberal as well. And so again, for me, it's like removing all of these pre-existing notions about blackness and at least creating a narrative that is accessible to anyone who themselves they don't have to be black, but if you are aware of black or identify as black or want to participate in a conversation which acknowledges the existence of the diaspora, then this is by the method by which we can do that and kind of start off from the beginning. Because I think the difference between us and the Americans is that even though obviously America itself is a melting pot, just like the UK, the African-American identity is a recognized one. It's stronger because it's recognized, whereas Black Britain is not. If I say where you're from, you won't normally say you're Black British. You might be like, from the UK, but my family are from Nigeria. My family are here, but my family are from Grenada. Whereas I guess I've been trying to work about establishing a
Well, you're giving us a cultural identity.
Yeah, a postmodern cultural identity is kind of what I'm working towards on a larger scale. Yeah, exactly that, Jackie. I feel like once we're together, and we can say we are Black Britain, we are a galvanized contingent of people within the UK and continental Europe on a larger scale. If I'm honest, like even as Black European, once we can do that, then we're able to cement our seat at the table, and then we can begin opening that up to to like there are certain nuances of the Black experience that I am not suitable to discuss, whether it's being a Black woman or a West African Black woman, or a West African Black woman who is Igbo versus Yoruba versus Hausa. You know what I mean? So, but once we get out there first, we can start adding this nuance to our experiences and really showing that kind of wealth, because you cannot, like, people from Newcastle and people from Scotland are called jocks and Geordies, right? And they're only separated by a border. But there is no way you are allowed to confuse the two of those. And it is a recognized distinction that we've seen in British art for many years. It's people who are from Glasgow and Edinburgh, like Celtics and Rangers. Like if you look at football in the UK, these derbies or these rivalries that exist along only borders, or technically the equivalent of postcodes, separate them. But people realize that there are distinct subcultures and those are respected, and we deserve the same.
1,000%. 1,000%. And that's why I think BAMOUS is great, because you're I think it's like, I feel like I know the Black British identity, but we know the Black British identity, but the whole world doesn't. And I think that's why BAMOUS is perfect, because you're giving us a cultural identity, because the African American identity is strong. They're like, I'm African American, whereas I'm like, oh, like I'm from London, but like, even when you're ticking boxes of where you're from, I'm like, do I tick Black African? Do I tick Black British? I don't know. And my dad's like, you're African, and my mum's like, you're British, and I'm like, I don't really know, guys. There you go. I don't really know.
Exactly that. It's exactly that. And I just think at least if there is a foundation where you are, then having identity alone is an important part of the human consciousness.
And also, in BAMOUS, I always knew Dipsy was Black. So when you were like, because I was getting them vibes.
What's even crazier is that the actor who played Dipsy is a guy called John Simmet, who is not only an actor, but is also a big supporter of the Black comedy industry in the UK. He runs something called Upfront Comedy, John Simmet. And John Simmet has been responsible, like John Simmet put money in my hand very early in my career. And he's really been largely responsible for providing, opportunities for young Black creatives, as well as, bringing comedians over from different parts of the world. Like I met another comic who's Eritrean called Ahmed Berhan. He's originally from Sweden. But again, it's like being able to meet like-minded individuals from Europe with a very similar but nuanced experience from our African-American cousins. It's great to see someone do that as well. So it's the potential for it is great, where you now have that social network where it's like, he'd be a part of being Dipsy and Teletubbies, as well as empowering other comedians and stuff. And, I look in that same respect that, like, the next kind of apron pulling kids phenomenon that's real successful on TV, why should a Black person not be included in that?
1,000%. Also, I hear ancestrally you're Igbo.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not Igbo, I'm Yoruba, but like,
it's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
You're Nigerian, I'm Nigerian. Like, this is great.
I'm just happy to know where I came from, I'm really happy to know where I came from. It's very humbling and flattering to know. I went to the museum in Grenada, and essentially they will, based on your name, to trace your lineage. And I think, a large part of, a large part of the Caribbean is mainly like, what would have been the Gold Coast and Nigerians and Ghanaians and stuff. And I think even there's certain dialects you find within Maroons in Jamaica that basically sound like Twi in Ghana and stuff as well. But again, it's being Igbo is cool. I probably have a lot more to learn. I've done some very rudimentary research, and some of my friends have kind of educated me. But it's cool. As soon as I found out, like, I used to find jollof rice spicy, but that's okay.
Dane, it's not spicy.
Nigerian food is the hottest food I've had. It's amazing. It is no, that's not a bad thing, because you know what? Because again, that is something that for me, that is applauded, that Nigeria deserves to be acknowledged for, because people normally tend to think that like Asian cuisine is hot and like curries, or South Indian cuisine is hot. They're not testing Nigerian food. And since I've had it, my tolerance for spicy food went through the roof exponentially. Like before I had Nigerian food, I used to be like, nah. Now I'm like Tabasco sauce on scrambled eggs, going crazy. So
That's what I did this morning. Spice on everything, like
on everything.
Hot sauce in my bag because I can't eat food without hot sauce. Like,
I'm with it.
I'm
with it. I mean, and you know, even now watching the resurgence and the rise of the face of British Nigerian culture and in music and excellent in areas of academia and, you know, just nowhere where I mean, I think the youngest admissions to Cambridge University for their mathematics have been 2 Nigerian children. And currently, I think the kid with the largest IQ in the UK is also Nigerian. And it's like, even for me, it's like, we watch films like Ocean's 11 or the whole Ocean's collection, or like Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can, depicting Frank Abagnale as like a fraud person. But that's looked as cool and avant-garde and like non-violent and white-collar crime. But when Nigerians do 419, then it's stupid. And me personally, you know, it's a really interesting cultural phenomenon because it means that Nigerians are prospering. The criminal element of Nigerians is prospering through non-violent crime. And really, they're just hustling people that are greedy. So why don't we have our equivalent of Ocean's 11? You know, the biggest con ever done, I believe, was by a Nigerian scammer who got the Bank of Tokyo to finance a airport in Brazil to like the tune of like, I think the scam was like 1.4 or 14, 1.4 billion or something like that, or 400 million. But for me, that should be a film,
right?
Or the dude, you know, Hush Puppy was the guy recently, right? The influencer dude.
Oh yeah, but he was
all right. I don't agree with what he does. He's, because as soon as you go on Instagram, you are leaving yourself open for capture.
Yeah.
But for me, I look at it and that, for me, that story is just as rich and has the same level of subtext as something like Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
You know, this is a guy with especially where he came from. He was living an amazing opulent lifestyle. You know, directly dining with, you know, head of, you know, fashion houses with Louis Vuitton and the like. However people feel about him, again, it's non-violent crime. You'll be able to realize the same lifestyle that we all chase. And, you know, what opulent lifestyle in many ways is not financed by some kind of crime or injustice? Very few of them. So I'm just looking. So what I'm trying to say to you is that if Hush Puppy listens to this podcast and you want to make a screenplay, I would make that. And that's kind of what I want to go next, because for me, it's about juxtaposition and having a discourse whereby if we're going to have discussions about these phenomena within our cultures, we can use very novel tools to do so. And I personally feel like, you know, someone like Hush Puppy, however people feel about him, that would be an entertaining film. It's a story we all want to hear about. Definitely. I want to see how someone was able to hustle with investment bank out of money for an airport that was never made. Like, these are interesting feats. These are worthy of study. I think they're worthy of study in like any Ivy League business school, and they're worthy of study in cinema as well. If we're going to lionize some of our non-violent criminals, then we should be lionizing all of them, because everyone loves an underdog story.
Yeah, and do you know what? When it came out in the press, when I went on his Instagram, it was like obviously, but actually the fact that he was doing it for so long,
absolutely, and he pulled a lot of other people. A lot of other people took his money, didn't ask any questions, and yeah, I just think it's an interesting study. Other than just he's just a wanton criminal and should be locked up, because Bernie Madoff stole 68 billion from white people with a Ponzi scheme, and they've made about 3 films based on that. The Guys with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell was based on that. The Big Short with the all-star cast was kind of based on that as well. So for me, it's like, if you can make these films kind of embellishing on these stories that definitely had the impact on culture, then one man able to do that by himself should definitely be focused on. So, you know, arguably, Hush Puppy could make some legal money by selling the rights to his screenplay. Not that I'm encouraging him to do that.
Dane is... That's it. But
that's the thing. I think it's about telling stories, man. It's about telling very interesting stories. And I'm starting to see a lot more of it take place. Like, even when I go on YouTube and stuff, there are people that are making stop motion cartoons about, like, you know, pre-colonial African civilizations, and doing it in the same way that you'd see like an anime show like Naruto, which is quite successful now. And I'm encouraging all of it. And I think over time, we have underestimated how much media plays a part in shaping our own self-image as well as our global perception. And so now that I'm in that industry, I want to do as much as possible to make that a more genuine depiction, and offer the opportunity for more capable people to tell their own stories as well.
Love that. I love that. You're a pioneer, Dane. You're a pioneer. Dane, I want to ask you something that I ask every single guest at the end of the episode of this podcast. What does Black joy mean to Dane Baptiste?
Oh, good question. For me, Black joy at this age is seeing the seeds planted by our predecessors who fought and died for our joy, and seeing some of that fruit begin to, sprout. So that's Black joy. For me, just seeing people like myself living, loving, thriving, and prospering is Black joy for me. That's pretty much it. Just love to see my people doing well.
Love that. Also, what song would you play at the cookout?
Oh, just one?
Okay, yeah, how about two?
What two? Thank you. Two is cool. Two. I would play Roses Are Red by Mac Band.
Yes, that's on my notes.
Good. Because someone else is going to do Candy, right? So I'll go pick something else.
Candy's an obvious choice.
That's what I'm saying. It's so obvious. So I'm going to do that one. And then...
That's on my notes. That's so funny.
And then, you know what I would do, yeah? I would do this just to be... I'm just being silly, but it's nostalgic for me is, you know, Rampage, the sound at Carnival? So I used to go to Rampage when I was a kid.
Okay, yeah.
So Rampage was normally the sound that's like the static one. So it's not with the flow, it's the static one with like one extra and everyone plays shit.
Yeah.
And it gets quite raucous. Everyone gets a bit hyped up. And once the DJ was like, you guys calm down, I'm gonna start playing some pop music and dead tunes like this. And he played Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana.
Oh, tune.
But everyone went crazy. They loved that tune. It was like and everyone went crazy. And I think it is a classic. I think so that would be the other song I played, because I feel like the cookout is not just going to be all Black people. Someone's going to bring a friend or a partner along, and we are welcoming and inclusive people. What I won't do is point to the one white person at the barbecue and go, "This one's for you, Jerry."
Do you know what I would play? Tevin Campbell, Can We Talk?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Classic. Absolute classic. They're taking
and
it back.
And of your smile, because
it's classic. I think, you know, and it's one of the most frequently asked questions at a cookout, I think. So get the ball rolling, get some sweetness going on there. But yeah, I'd play Smells Like Teen Spirit because I like the song. It's about rebellion. And I kind of definitely, as I'm older, really understand what Kurt Cobain stood for and what his misgivings were about contemporary culture. So yeah, and for me, the song is also about reminding the children they're the future in it, and that I hope to be able to pass the torch on to my successors one day and keep it going until we're all free. So.
Hallelujah, amen. Thank you, Dane Baptiste, for coming on.
Thank you.
I've had so much fun. I hope you've had fun.
I've had so much fun. I really have enjoyed it. Surprisingly, I'm one of these guys who work in comedy who like to talk. So I've had lots of fun going blah, 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 nothing, blah, blah, blah. But I've had a wonderful time. Thank you so much for having me. And genuinely, like, it's being able to talk to you guys and enjoying what I do that means the most, and is the reason why I do what I do. So
yes, and hopefully BAMOUS gets commissioned for more episodes. That's what we're hoping and praying for. We need more.
Absolutely. I'm happy for it. Not just for me, like what BAMOUS represents is, as well as being a institution and a new vehicle for British comedy and for Black British comedy. But also, you know, again, it's a first that somebody my age, from our background, where we're from, being given a commission. And, you know, even BAMOUS, just as a format, we film in what's called XR, like augmented reality. And it's, again, never been seen before on British TV screens, not at least in a comedy format. So always kind of innovating and, hoping that continues with the series.
Yes. Thank you, Dane.
Thank you.
Stay safe out there.